The mirror in the boutique dressing room was a stranger, reflecting a version of myself I'd long forgotten. At 67, I'd traded elegance for utility. Loose blouses, sensible pants, clothes that faded into the background of a life spent working, always working. But today, I stood transformed, draped in a dark blue dress that clung to me like a whispered promise of something more. A silver brooch, delicate and costly, glinted at my chest, catching the light like a star plucked from a twilight sky. The store assistant, Clara, a young woman with a smile as warm as a summer afternoon, adjusted the folds with care. "Mrs. Thornton, this dress was made for you. The color, it makes your eyes shine like sapphires." I nodded, unaccustomed to such flattery. My eyes, still sharp despite the years, flickered with a spark I hadn't felt in decades. Anticipation, perhaps, or a fragile hope. In 2 weeks, my only son, James, would marry his fiancée, Pauline, in a grand ceremony at the Belvedere Hotel in Wilmington, Delaware. Despite the chasm that had grown between us like a river carving through stone, I wanted to look the part of a proud mother. I wanted to belong, even if just for one day. Wilmington had cradled my entire life. I'd opened my first laundromat here, a tiny shop on Maple Street, scrubbing floors and balancing books while my husband, David, repaired machines. I'd buried David here, his heart failing him 16 years ago, leaving me to carry on alone. I'd raised James here, watching him grow from a boy with a gap-toothed grin to a man who seemed to outgrow me. And now, this town would host the last great milestone worth staying for, my son's wedding. I paid for the dress with my card, the weight of the purchase heavier than the bag in my hand. As I stepped on to Wilmington's bustling Main Street, the afternoon sun glinted off my old Toyota, waiting faithfully in the parking lot like a loyal companion. I glanced at my watch. 2:15 p.m. I had an appointment with the wedding agency at 3 o'clock. The Pearl Weddings office was a sleek sanctuary on the city's outskirts. All white walls and polished glass, adorned with framed photos of radiant couples frozen in their happiest moments. Carrie, the coordinator, greeted me with a professional smile, her blonde hair pulled into a neat bun. She led me to a meeting room where folders were spread across a mahogany table like a map of someone else's dreams. "Hey, Mrs. Thornton," she said, her voice bright but tinged with curiosity. "We've prepared all the paperwork you requested. Are you sure you want to keep your involvement confidential?" I nodded, my voice steady but soft, like a river running deep. "Yes, James and Pauline can't know I'm covering most of the expenses. They believe her parents are paying for everything." Carrie's brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. It wasn't every day a mother hid her generosity, but I had my reasons that cut deeper than I could explain to a stranger. "My relationship with my son is complicated," I said, choosing my words with care, like stepping through a field of thorns. "He wouldn't accept my money directly. He thinks it would undermine his authority in front of Pauline." The truth was a heavier burden, one I kept locked away. After David's death, I'd built a small empire of 7 laundromats while raising James alone. It was a life of sweat and sacrifice, not glamour, but it was mine, built with my own hands, my own will. But when James went to college, he began to see me differently. I was too simple, too unpolished for the world he craved, a world of elite connections, polished facades, and glittering ambition. When I sold my business 5 years ago for $2.3 million, his sudden interest in me wasn't about love. It was about what I could give him. Carrie slid the paperwork across the table. Banquet rentals, photographers, florists, musicians, a string quartet for the ceremony, even the honeymoon in Italy. The total was staggering. 86,400. More money than I'd ever spent in a single moment. But James was my only child, and despite the distance between us, I wanted his wedding to be a masterpiece, a memory to cherish, a gift from a mother who still believed in him. "You realize," Carrie said, handing me a pen, her voice cautious, "if you cancel less than a week before, we can't offer a full refund." "I understand," I replied, signing the final document with a steady hand. "No one's canceling this wedding." Oh, how those words would echo back, heavy with a truth I couldn't yet see. The morning of the wedding dawned like a promise. The sky a brilliant blue, the air crisp with possibility. I rose early, my heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. I styled my thick gray hair with care, applied light makeup to soften the lines etched by time, and slipped into the blue dress. It felt like armor, a shield against the uncertainties of the day. In my purse, I tucked an elegant envelope containing a check, a generous gift for James and Pauline's honeymoon in Italy, a final gesture of love. The Belvedere Hotel was Wilmington's crown jewel, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers that cast rainbows across the walls. I parked my Toyota among sleek BMWs and Mercedes, a flicker of doubt creeping in. Maybe I should have taken a cab, arrived in style. But no, I was Elizabeth Thornton, a woman who'd built her life from the ground up, who'd scrubbed floors and balanced books to give her son a future. I wouldn't shrink now, not for anyone. The lobby buzzed with guests in tailored suits and shimmering dresses, their laughter a symphony of the privilege. I scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces, but most were strangers. Pauline's family, James's new circle, people who belonged to a world I'd never been invited to join. Then, a voice broke through the hum, bright and joyful, like a beacon in the fog. "Grandma!" It was Eloise, my 22-year-old granddaughter from James's first marriage to Veronica. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her blue eyes, my eyes, sparkled with warmth. She threw her arms around me, her soft blue bridesmaid's dress swishing as she hugged me tightly. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "I was afraid you wouldn't come because of, well, you know." I smiled, brushing off the unspoken tension like dust from my dress. "How could I miss my own son's wedding, darling?" Eloise offered to introduce me to the others, her enthusiasm a balm to my nerves. But before she could, James appeared, cutting through the crowd like a storm cloud. At 42, he was still handsome, tall, trim, with a neatly trimmed beard flecked with gray. But his eyes, so like David's, held a storm of irritation, a darkness that chilled me. "Mom," he said, his voice tight as if my presence was an unwelcome surprise. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, confusion tightening my chest like a vice. "I came to your wedding, of course." He glanced around nervously, his jaw clenching, then took my arm, pulling me aside to a quiet corner of the lobby. "We talked about this," he said, his voice low and firm, like a parent scolding a child. "You're not on the guest list." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath, leaving me reeling. "What are you talking about, James? How could I not be invited to my own son's wedding?" He sighed, his expression one of strained patience, as if explaining the obvious to someone too simple to understand. "This is an elite event, Mom. Pauline's parents are here, their friends, our colleagues. I don't think you'd be comfortable." The truth crystallized, sharp and cold, cutting through the haze of my hope. He wasn't just forgetting to invite me. He didn't want me here. I, Elizabeth Thornton, who'd worked her hands raw to give him a future, who'd mourned his father alone, who'd built a business from nothing, was an embarrassment to his polished world. "You're ashamed of me," I said, my voice steady. "No, of course not," he stammered, but his eyes darted away, betraying the lie. "It's just, Pauline's parents have invested so much, and we don't want anything to ruin the experience." "You don't want your laundry mom to ruin it," I finished, my voice cutting through his excuses like a knife through silk. "Mom, don't start," he said, irritation flaring, his patience fraying. "We can meet after the honeymoon, just us in a smaller setting." Before I could respond, Pauline approached, radiant in a designer gown that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but her eyes assessed me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong room. "James, darling, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice honeyed but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Everything's fine," James said quickly, his hand still on my arm. "Mom was just leaving." Pauline's smile didn't waver, but it held no warmth, only a polite dismissal. "Oh, Mrs. Thornton, what a shame you couldn't stay. Perhaps another time." I looked at James, waiting for him to say something, anything, in my defense. A word, a gesture, a flicker of the boy who'd once run to me with open arms. But he stood silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding mine, his silence louder than any words. "I'm sorry, but you weren't invited," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, go." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. Eloise grabbed my arm, her voice trembling with anger and tears. "Grandma, please stay. I want you here. This isn't right." I touched her cheek gently, my heart aching for her, for the innocence she still carried. "It's okay, honey. Call me tomorrow." As I walked out of the Belvedere, the curious stares of guests burned into my back, their whispers a soft hum of judgment. The sun still shone, but the world felt darker, colder, as if a shadow had settled over my heart. I slid into my car, the envelope with the check still in my purse, and sat there, staring at the dashboard, the weight of James's words sinking in like stones in a river. Then, something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity, sharp and unyielding. For years, I'd made excuses for James, poured my love and money into him, hoping for a scrap of respect, a flicker of the boy who'd once loved me without shame. I'd turned a blind eye to his neglect, his shame, his demands, believing one day he'd see me as more than a means to an end. No more, until I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady despite the storm in my chest, and dialed the bank. Richard, my bank manager, answered with his usual cheer, oblivious to the earthquake about to shake my world. "Mrs. Thornton, just checking on your accounts. Everything all right?" I stared at the clock on my dashboard. 4:20 p.m. The ceremony would start in 40 minutes. The banquet, paid for entirely by me, would follow at 7:12. Every detail, the flowers, the music, the wine, the honeymoon, was a gift from my heart, a heart now broken by my son's rejection. "Richard," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel, "I need to cancel some payments. Immediately." I listed the transactions. 80 sound, 400 for the Belvedere Hotel, Golden Leaf Catering, Jameson's Photography, Rosemary Flower Salon, the String Quartet, the 2-week honeymoon in Italy. Richard's voice faltered, his professionalism strained. "These are large sums, Mrs. Thornton. May I ask why?" "My son's wedding," I said, the words sharp as glass, cutting through the air. "But there's been an unforeseen circumstance." I could hear Richard typing, his tone cautious but steady. "Most payments are scheduled for tomorrow, so we can stop them. Some may have partial authorization, but I'll contact the back office immediately to halt everything." "Thank you," I said, a strange calm washing over me, like the quiet before a storm breaks. "One more thing, Richard. I want to open a trust fund for my granddaughter, Eloise Thornton. Transfer the canceled funds there for her education, her future." Next, I called Carrie at Pearl Weddings. Her voice was bright, oblivious to the bombshell I was about to drop. "Mrs. Thornton, the wedding's underway. Everything's on track. Is there something you need to clarify?" "I'm canceling all wedding payments," I said, my voice firm, unyielding like stone. "What?" Carrie gasped, her tone cracking like thin ice. "You're kidding, right? The ceremony's happening now. The guests are seated." "I'm not kidding," I replied, my resolve unshakable. "The payments are stopped. There's a force majeure clause in our contract, isn't there?" Carrie's voice trembled with panic, her words tumbling out. "But the vendors, the guests, it'll be a scandal. The banquet starts in an hour. The florists, the caterers, the musician, they're all here." "Not my problem," I said, my words cold but deliberate, each one a step toward reclaiming my power. "Tell the bride and groom their sponsor withdrew funding, and if they ask who, tell them the truth. The groom's mother, who wasn't invited, paid for their entire celebration." I hung up and started the car, the engines hum a steady counterpoint to the chaos I'd just unleashed. As I drove home, the weight of my decisions settled like a stone in my stomach. But it wasn't regret. It was liberation, a breaking of chains I had worn for too long. For the first time in years, I wasn't bending to James's whims, wasn't sacrificing my dignity for his approval. I was choosing myself. Back at the Belvedere, the world James had so carefully constructed began to crumble like a house of cards in a storm. Eloise called me an hour later, her voice trembling with shock, the background filled with chaotic murmurs. "Grandma, it's a nightmare here. The flowers are being packed away. The caterers are leaving. The guests are confused. What's happening?" I sighed, the truth heavy but necessary, like a truth long buried finally brought to light. "I paid for the wedding, Eloise, in secret, because your father wouldn't accept my help openly. He wanted to impress Pauline's family, to prove he belonged in their world. But when he told me I wasn't welcome, that I didn't belong in his elite event, I canceled the payments." Eloise was silent, then whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He kicked you out? That's awful. Grandma, I'm so sorry." "I know, sweetheart," I said, my voice softening, a mother's love steady even in the storm. "But sometimes lessons are hard. Your father needs to learn what it means to value the people who love him, who've given everything for him." The fallout was swift and merciless, a cascade of consequences that rippled through the Belvedere's grand hall. James called me repeatedly. his voicemails a crescendo of fury and desperation. "Mom, what the hell have you done? You've ruined my wedding, my reputation. Do you realize what this means for me?" I didn't answer. Not yet. My heart was still raw from his rejection, and I needed time to gather the strength to face his rage. Eloise later painted the scene for me, her voice a mix of sorrow and disbelief. The hotel manager, a short, stern man in a crisp suit, stood firm as James argued, his voice rising in desperation. "Mr. Thornton, the payments have been withdrawn. We can't provide services without funding. You have 30 minutes to clear the premises." Pauline, her perfect makeup smudged with tears, stood nearby, her dream wedding dissolving before her eyes like a mirage. Her parents, Jeffrey and Margaret Redgrave, an elegant couple in their 60s with the air of old money, demanded answers, their voices sharp with indignation. "What's going on, James?" Jeffrey barked, his commanding presence filling the room. "You said you were covering everything. You told us your business was thriving." Was the truth unraveled when Carrie, trembling but resolute, approached the couple, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, all payments were withdrawn by the main sponsor, your mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Thornton. She funded most of the wedding, including the honeymoon." James's face drained of color, his carefully crafted facade crumbling like sand. He'd told everyone Pauline's parents had paid, but they'd only covered the rehearsal dinner, a modest contribution compared to my $8,600. Jeffrey's voice boomed through the hall, his anger a thunderclap. "You lied to us. You said you were covering everything, and now we learn your mother, your uninvited mother, paid for it all. A mother you didn't even invite?" Guests whispered, their murmurs a rising tide of judgment. Some pulled out phones, recording the drama as it unfolded, the scandal already spreading like wildfire. Pauline's sobs echoed as she fled the room, her mother trailing behind, trying to console her. The banquet hall emptied, the chandeliers dimming over a celebration that never began. James stood alone, humiliated, his perfect day reduced to chaos and whispers. Eloise slipped onto the hotel's terrace, her voice low as she called me again. "Grandma, it's falling apart. The flowers are gone. The food's being packed up, and Dad's yelling at everyone. Pauline's parents are furious. They didn't know you were paying. Dad told them he covered everything." I closed my eyes, picturing the scene, the weight of my decisions settling deeper. "I'm sorry you're caught in this, Eloise," I said. "But your father made his choice when he decided I wasn't good enough for his new life." She hesitated, her voice softening. "I understand why you did it. What he did to you. It's unforgivable. Sometimes," I said quietly, "the hardest lessons are the ones that set us free." The next morning, I woke to a pounding on my door, insistent and angry, like the beat of a war drum. The clock read 7:00 a.m., the sky still soft with the blush of dawn. I knew who it was before I heard his voice, raw and furious. "Mom, open the door right now. I know you're in there." I slipped on my robe, my heart steady despite the storm brewing at my doorstep. When I opened the door, James stood there, a wreck of the man he'd been yesterday. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes red from a sleepless night, burning with rage and something deeper, desperation. "You ruined my life!" he shouted, pushing past me into the house, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. I closed the door quietly, my voice calm, unshaken. "Good morning, James. You're early." Don't you dare! He snapped, his finger jabbing the air like a weapon. Don't stand there pretending nothing happened. You sabotaged my wedding out of spite. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Pauline's parents, our friends, my colleagues. I walked to the kitchen, the familiar ritual of making coffee grounding me in the face of his fury. I filled the kettle, the water glugging softly. I remember exactly what happened, I said, my voice steady, deliberate. You asked me to leave your wedding. You said I wasn't invited, so I canceled the payments I was making for your celebration. James followed me, his voice shaking it with rage, his hands clenched into fists. You planned this. You paid in secret just so you could pull the rug out from under me. You wanted revenge. I turned to face him, my eyes meeting his, steady and unyielding. No, James. When I arranged with the agency 2 months ago, I had no idea you'd exclude me. What kind of mother expects her own son to bar her from his wedding? I paid because I loved you, because I wanted your day to be perfect despite everything. He faltered, his anger flickering like a candle in the wind, but he pressed on, his voice rising. You should have told me you were paying. It's manipulative to go behind my back. Would you have accepted my money if I'd offered it openly? I asked, my voice quiet but piercing, like a blade slipping through armor. He looked away, his silence louder than any words, his jaw tight with guilt he wouldn't admit. I continued, my voice steady but laced with years of unspoken pain, each word a stone laid bare. For years, I've supported you. Your apartment when you moved out, your first wedding to Veronica, Eloise's private school, your debts when you were drowning in credit card bills. I gave you everything, James, and all I asked was for a little respect, a little acknowledgement. But yesterday, you made it clear I'm not good enough for your world. Why? Because I'm the laundry lady who raised you. Because I don't have a degree or high society connections. He mumbled, his voice unconvincing, his eyes avoiding mine. It's not about that. The wedding was for a certain circle, that's all. A circle your mother doesn't fit into. I finished, my words cutting through his excuses like a knife through silk. Because I'm not polished enough, not educated enough, not elite enough for your new life. He waved a hand, dismissing my words as if they were nothing. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. But you have to fix this. Reinstate the payments. Call the bank, the agency, everyone. Tell them it was a mistake. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness mirroring the moment, grounding me. It's too late, James. The money's been returned to my account. I received confirmation from the bank last night. Then make new payments, he shouted, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, his footsteps heavy, frantic. Pauline's hysterical. Her parents are threatening to cut ties. We spent the night in a cheap motel because the hotel wouldn't give us a room. Do you have any idea what you've done? I watched him, remembering the boy who'd throw tantrums when he didn't get his way, who'd sulk for days over a toy denied. Nothing had changed, not really. Where were you planning to spend your honeymoon? I asked, my voice deceptively calm, a quiet challenge. He stopped, suspicious, his eyes narrowing. Italy. 2 weeks. The flight leaves tomorrow, or was supposed to. What's that got to do with anything? And who paid for it? I asked, my gaze steady, unrelenting. Me and Pauline, of course, he said, his voice faltering, a crack in his confidence. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. I paid for that too, through the agency. It was all part of the 86,400. James sank into a chair, his face paling, his hands trembling slightly. That's impossible. You couldn't afford that kind of money. I sold the business 5 years ago, I said, my voice steady, a quiet strength rising within me. For $2.3 million, I invested it wisely. Live off the interest. I could afford to give you the wedding of your dreams, James, and a honeymoon in Italy. But you made it clear I wasn't part of that dream. He stared at me, his anger giving way to shock, then calculation, his mind racing to reframe the narrative. Why didn't you tell me you had that kind of money? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost accusatory. I wasn't hiding it, I said calmly. You never asked. You were only interested in what you could take. Remember that startup you wanted me to invest $200,000 in? No plan, no details, just a promise of riches. I said no, and you called me old-fashioned, too cautious to see the future. But my old-fashioned ways built a business that kept us afloat, that gave you everything. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, my voice firm. The money's gone, James. It's in a trust for Eloise's education, college, graduate school, maybe a doctorate. She's 22, with her whole life ahead of her. She deserves it more than a wedding you didn't want me at. You're doing this out of spite, he roared, sweeping a sugar bowl and salt shaker off the counter, the porcelain scattering like fragments of our broken bond. You want to ruin my life. I stood, my voice unwavering, my heart steady. No, James, I'm doing this because I'm done letting you use me. I'm your mother, not your bank. I've tolerated your neglect, your shame, your demands for too long, hoping one day you'd see me as more than a means to an end. You crossed a line yesterday, and I won't stand for it anymore. He stormed to the door, his face red with rage, his voice trembling with fury. You'll regret this, he hissed, turning in the doorway. I'll make sure of it. You're not my mother. You've never been a real mother to me. Those words should have cut me, should have broken me, but instead, I felt only relief, a quiet, unshakable calm. Goodbye, James, I said softly, my voice steady as the door slammed shut, the glass rattling in its frame. I sank into a chair, the shards of the broken cup scattered across the floor, a symbol of the relationship that had shattered beyond repair. But instead of pain, I felt a strange freedom, as if the last thread tying me to a toxic bond had finally snapped. For the first time in years, I was free. 4 months later, I sat on the terrace of my new home in Savannah, Georgia, a glass of iced lemonade sweating in my hand, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and jasmine. The sky was painted with the soft pinks and golds of dusk, a canvas of possibility. Wilmington was a memory now, sold along with my old house in 3 days, at a price that felt like fate's gentle nudge. This new house was small, but perfect. A 1-story cottage with a garden that bloomed with promise, its white picket fence a quiet rebellion against the life I'd left behind. At 67, I'd started over, leaving behind the ghosts of a life spent pleasing others, sacrificing my dreams for a son who'd turned his back on me. I enrolled in watercolor classes at the local community center, rediscovering a passion I'd buried as a young girl when life demanded practicality over dreams. The brush felt like an old friend, guiding my hand across the canvas, painting scenes of rivers, skies, and distant shores I'd only imagined. Each stroke was a reclaiming of the girl I'd once been, the woman I was becoming. I started learning Spanish, my tongue stumbling over unfamiliar words, each phrase a step toward a new adventure. I laughed at my mistakes, the sound foreign but freeing. In 3 days, I'd board a Caribbean cruise, a 2-week odyssey across turquoise waters, stopping at islands I'd only seen in pictures. David and I had dreamed of such a trip when we were young, lying in bed after long days at the laundromat, talking of beaches and sunsets we'd see someday. He never got the chance, but I would carry his memory with me, a silent companion on this journey. Eloise was thriving in her master's program in architecture, funded by the trust I'd created with the wedding money. She visited me in Savannah, her laughter filling the house as we walked the city's historic streets, sipped coffee in cozy cafes, and talked about her dreams. Her eyes sparkled with ambition, her designs bold and visionary, and I felt a quiet pride knowing I'd given her wings to soar. Dad's quieter now, Eloise said one afternoon, stirring her latte, her voice tinged with sadness. Less boastful. He took a new job, a step down, but he seems humbled, I guess. The wedding fiasco changed him. I nodded, my heart no longer tethered to James's choices, but curious nonetheless. And Pauline. Eloise wrinkled her nose, a gesture so like her mother's it made me smile. They're together, but it's tense. She's always pointing out his flaws, and he's lost that swagger he used to have. They had a second wedding, a small one, in a restaurant on the edge of town. It was sad. Everyone knew about the first one, the whispers, the scandal. Pauline's parents sat there like they were at a funeral. I sipped my coffee, picturing the scene, the weight of James's lies pressing down on him. Did he mention me? I asked, though I knew the answer. Eloise shook her head. Not directly, but sometimes when I talk about you, he listens. I think he misses you, Grandma, even if he won't admit it. I didn't comment, unwilling to nurture illusions. James knew my number, knew where I was. If he wanted to rebuild, the door was open, but I wouldn't hold my breath, not anymore. My life was mine now, defined by my choices, my joys, not his approval. The cruise was a revelation, a tapestry of moments woven from freedom and discovery. I stood on the deck of the luxury liner, the wind tangling my hair as the coastline faded into the distance, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. I haggled in Jamaican markets, my halting Spanish drawing smiles and laughter from vendors. I danced under the stars in Barbados, my laughter mingling with strangers who became friends, their stories as vibrant as the island's colors. I sipped rum in a beachside bar, the taste sharp and sweet, a toast to the life I had reclaimed. Each moment was a step away from the woman who'd lived for others, who'd carried the weight of her son's expectations like a stone around her neck. I was Elizabeth Thornton, not just a mother, not just a widow, but a woman alive with possibility, painting her own future with bold, unapologetic strokes. Back in Savannah, my life unfolded like a painting, each day a new stroke of color, each moment a brushstroke of joy. I made friends. Martha, a spirited photographer who'd traveled the world, became my confidant, her infectious laugh a constant in my new life. We dined at seafood restaurants by the Savannah River, walked the city's cobblestone streets, and planned adventures that felt like dreams once out of reach. "Your son's loss," Martha said one night, her voice matter-of-fact as she sipped her wine. "You've given him everything, Elizabeth. It's time to live for you." I nodded, her words a balm to old wounds, a reminder of the strength I'd found. My mother used to say, "Children are raised for the world, not for you." I raised James to live his life. Now I'm living mine. One evening, a letter arrived, handwritten, the envelope bearing Eloise's familiar script. Inside was a note and a photo. Eloise standing proudly beside an architectural model, her smile radiant, her eyes bright with triumph. "Got the highest grade," she wrote. "Thank you, Grandma, for giving me this chance. I love you." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of joy, warm and unburdened. Eloise was my legacy, my heart's true north, a young woman with dreams as vast as the sky. The trust fund had given her wings, and watching her soar was worth every penny I'd redirected from James's wedding, every moment of pain I'd endured. Eloise's updates kept me tethered to James, just enough. He'd settled into his new job, a smaller insurance firm with a lower salary, a humbling step back from his ambitions. Pauline stayed, but their marriage was a fragile thing, tested by the weight of his lies and the shadow of the failed wedding. "He's quieter," Eloise said in one of our calls. "Less boastful, more real, maybe." "I think he's learning, Grandma, even if it's slow." I hoped she was right, hoped the lessons of that day had planted a seed of change in him. But I no longer carried that hope like a burden. My life was no longer defined by his choices, his approval, his presence or absence. Savannah became my canvas, my home, my sanctuary. I joined a book club where lively debates filled my evenings with laughter and new perspectives. I painted a mural in my garden, a vibrant scene of the Caribbean Sea, its blues and greens a reminder of the woman I'd become, bold, unapologetic, alive. I signed up for a Mediterranean cruise, dreaming of Greek islands, Italian sunsets, and the history I'd only read about in books. I learned more Spanish, my vocabulary growing with each lesson, each word a bridge to a world I'd once thought closed to me. One night, as I stood on my terrace under a sky studded with stars, I pulled out the old photo album I'd brought from Wilmington, the only remnant of my past life besides clothes, and a few papers. I flipped to a picture of David, James, and me on a beach 35 years ago. We were laughing, carefree, a simple family with dreams as vast as the ocean behind us. "I hope you'd be proud, David," I whispered, tracing his face with my finger. "I hope you'd say I deserve this new life." I closed the album and looked out at the night, the scent of jasmine drifting from the neighbor's garden, the stars winking like promises. A quiet voice within me, perhaps my own, perhaps fate's, whispered back, "You are enough." And then, a surprise. A letter from James slipped under my door one morning, months later. His handwriting was unsteady, the words simple but heavy with meaning. "Mom, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll forgive me, but I want to try. Can we talk?" I held the letter, my heart stirring but not breaking. I wasn't ready to answer, not yet. But the door was open, a crack of possibility, and that was enough for now. To you, dear listener, I say this. Life is too short to live for someone else's approval. Betrayal may wound, but it can also awaken. At 67, I found my strength, my joy, my freedom. I stood on the deck of a ship, the wind in my hair, and saw a world waiting for me. My story isn't over. It's just beginning. And so is yours. Thank you for joining me on Elizabeth's Stories. Until next time, chase your own horizon and never let anyone dim your light. Good night.